right. Welcome to the Fourth Brain Podcast. I'm Ali.
And I'm Somil. Today, let's delve into the topic of Agentic Enterprise. So, we want to kind of break it down. Last time, Ali, you mentioned that Sam Altman said we'll see in the next 10 years more person billion-dollar companies will be run by agents. That basically says to what is an Agentic Enterprise. Let's try to break it down for our audience.
Yeah.
And the first question that I want to start, with you is, what is Agentic Enterprise? How would you define it?
So, an agentic enterprise is a company or an enterprise that utilizes autonomous agents or semi-autonomous agents to make decisions, take actions, but also create feedback loops to understand the outcomes and improve. So that's how I actually define it. They need to be very data driven or have very sophisticated data driven ways of working, but also they need to have a different way of approaching the decision making. What do you think?
No, absolutely. I think now a lot of people are talking about agents and implementing agents, but they are basically just wrappers on top of the Chat GPT or some kind of an LLM. If you look at a true agentic enterprise, you have to start thinking about how agents make decisions. And I think fundamentally, you have to understand that agents make decisions differently from humans. Humans are more like long-term planning, and we try to predict a future. We make some assumptions, think about all the things that can go wrong, and then just try to make the things very bulletproof. I think that's where the problem starts, because when you try to overthink it, it actually fails. Agents don't make decisions that way. Agents execute in a very iterative manner. They basically look at what is the situation right now, what's my constraints, what are going to be actions that I can do, what is my objective, where do I get the highest reward, optimize that. It's a very iterative, recursive kind of decision making and execution process. And as you also said, like you can't put agents on a planning system. What will they do? I mean, they can't just you can't have rewards on planning. So the rewards actually come from execution. That means the planning and the execution, they have to come together. So agents plan and execute at the same time. And this is very different from, I think, how we see it today, management system or enterprise systems. I think that's a key difference.
Yeah, I see that, and I think you're getting back to one of my biggest beefs of the enterprise software stack, and that's everybody's building linear and rule-based centralized things. Agents are not chaining multiple RPAs together, workflows together, and saying, "Oh, here is an agent-driven automation." That's not the case.
Yeah,
right? It is
break
more.
it down a bit. So when you look at the current enterprise paradigm, we can call it current enterprise IT, enterprise business architecture. I mean, it's one and the same thing. I think the operating model, enterprise architecture, business architecture, they have kind of blended into one giant monolith. What do you think? How would you define it today? Like in a very simple way, and from an agent's point of view, how do you see it? Where do you see the limitations are? So if you were an agent, how would you see the world today?
So you're the one usually who does history lessons, but I'm trying gonna take your mantle this time. If you look at the centralized monolithic but also fairly static setup of the current ERP systems, they come from the fact that in the 70s or 80s everybody wanted to go after best practices. Why? Because everybody looked at how they run the company, how decisions are made as commodities. And what they competed with was their products, their marketing, their design. There's a difference nowadays because with service, you really can't just follow best practices. You need to be best in class if you really want to win. And then that means that having these very static, very structured ways of approaching things. If I'm an agent, I don't know what to do with that because it's basically built for a 6 months plan. Yes, I can probably do some predictions for that 6 month plan, but doesn't make any sense. Like what productivity gain are you gaining to ask an AI model to tell you, okay, tell me what should be in our next 6 months plan, and then go away and then come back in 6 months? What is it that you're gaining here? When you start creating higher clock speed, that's where an agent comes in and has a much more valuable input. It's the same as looking at Formula One races now. Like, you and I talk about Formula One a lot nowadays, and the way it's actually designed, the race is designed to minimize the competitiveness of the car. So they're basically trying to reduce the amount of crazy stuff that people put in the cars. So the car is very highly regulated. So how you win a race is predominantly through your race strategy. And that's why I see the main limitation of these current paradigms are they've been built for a different era. They've been built for winning the race through your car, whereas now you need to win the race through your operation, and you need to be able to have a much higher clock speed to do so, because agents don't bring productivity into static systems. So that's how I see it. Do you see any other limitations, or do you have any other history lessons for us?
If I were an agent, and I think one of the things that I would find very strange, the dichotomy between planning and operations, because what's happening is that it is the way these enterprise systems were designed. It's just a basic a set of tables that just point to each other, different schemas, and then you have built like an order in which they have to be filled for them to make logical sense. And that has created like a dichotomy between planning. So there's a bunch of people in an organization who do planning, who basically try to just predict the future, and then there are a bunch of people who are trying to implement that today, and then it's creating a very different kind of a very different kind of divide in the organization. So on one hand, you have plans which are not like real. They're not based on the reality. They are assumptions, best case assumptions, but a lot of resources go into that planning process, and they consume a lot of organization's time and resources and everything. At the same time, we see the operations are firefighting. It's always something is wrong. They're trying to adjust and adapt. For me, that would be, if I'm an agent, like, what's wrong? I mean, why can't you just, I mean, for me, the planning and the operation are one and the same thing. It's all part of execution. I think this is where I probably would see I have my issues with the way the planning setup is, or the current paradigm is. So let's just take this example a bit further. So let's say somebody wants to implement an agentic solution on top of this particular stack, right? They have the traditional monolithic software as a service, or on-prem, or legacy, or whatever, and then they're trying to build an agentic layer on top of it. What do you think happen? You'll try to do that.
Well, I would say a lot of agents will hit the wall or get burnt out and apply for sick leave. That's the first thing that will happen. Now, but joking aside, I think the main thing that will happen is that, well, you can't really add and shove agility into a static system. It's very resource intensive. It's very much built for static and rigid compliance, not for executing things. And it deliberately has divided those two. As you said, planning and operations are semi-deliberately, maybe by accident, to some extent, by focusing mostly on planning. That has happened. So putting an agent into that, you don't have any strategy to give it anything to do. Like, you need to give actions and decisions for agents to make. Otherwise, if you're just basically chaining different workflows into your ERP, you're good with RPAs, and you're not really leveraging this paradigm. So that's how I see it. Do you see any other challenges? Or
I actually, a funny visual came to my mind when you say agents hitting the wall. Imagining, like, you have this maze made of tables, and the agent wants to go left, but every time it goes, you basically, you have the doors are all on right. So it's literally like hitting the wall. I say, okay, but I want to go left, but no, but the door is on the right. So basically, it might reach left, but like every time it's to kind of take a right or going back or going front, except left. I think that would put a lot of agents into a spin. It's like, what's going on? Why can't I go left? Because that's how we have set things up. So the table after table after table, and I think each kind of funny thing that we've done is all the decision logic. If you like the ERPs, the way they're set up, all the decision logic, the constraints, they're all kind of built into the walls. So actually, if somebody has to figure it out, first of all, I think they have kind of taken the whole competition, locked the competition out, or at least they will try to lock the competition out. I think that's one of the things all these major ERP providers will try to do, is try to lock the doors from outside so nobody else apart from their agents can read it. And even their agents would find it extremely difficult to basically navigate the whole maze, because the way, I mean, I looked into some of the configuration and templates, and it's so complex, and sometimes it's so hilarious how people have turned workarounds to solve like basic issues. I think somebody was telling me, I think you were telling me that about the bank where they had this pop coming out every time, and then everything was shut down. And eventually they got so frustrated that they had to write a script to press OK whenever the pop-up comes up. I think this happens a lot of times. People have built workarounds around nonsensical things, and
Exactly.
I pity the agents that will take the first dive into these enterprise systems.
I have one more analogy for you. If you remember the second movie of the Matrix trilogy, it was this hallway with a lot of doors, and they needed a key maker to figure out how to get out of the doors. The way I would see it, if you put agents into these kind of systems, is like putting people into that hallway and then either kill the key maker or just basically swallow all the keys. So they basically just open doors and they get nowhere, and then they just basically get lost and they can't do anything.
That is hilarious. And I think another point we have to also bring about is the accountability and responsibility. So today it's a bit of a challenge for organizations to specify who is responsible. Like one of the big questions is who owns the data. I think that's a big big question mark in a lot of enterprises. I'm just worried. I mean, what would happen with agentic when you build agentic solutions which are supposed to kind of cut across different what who would own them, who would be responsible? So what happens? So who basically who would get impacted if they make a wrong decision or something goes south, and it will go south catastrophically sometimes. Who would be accountable, and what tools do they have to diagnose or prevent it or monitor the actions? I think this is some of the challenges.
Yeah, but let's be a bit more positive as well and talk about what are the possibilities and what people need to think about and do. In my mind, one of the key things is can you actually break things down in a smaller actions? And going back to plug our previous episodes, next best actions strategies as an example, that is where you can actually have a mind shift of dealing with these agents. What else? What do you have
I
in
think we
mind?
have to re-look processes. As I said, agents make decisions fundamentally very differently. They need to understand, like, if you want to frame the question to agent, you have to frame it in the way that they understand. So it's the objective, the actions, the rewards, the states, the environment. So we have to frame the problems and frame the business in the way that an agent can understand and take decision. That means the way we have designed our processes, I think we have to reimagine them, quite a few of them. The way we designed our systems, the way we designed our infrastructure. I think everything, we have to basically make everything based on an iterative principle, or as I said, next best strategy, next best action strategy. The next best action strategy inherently doesn't look like 10 steps ahead, or maybe it doesn't look the whole picture. It looks at, okay, based on where you are right now, what is the next most optimum action that you can take based on the information that you have right now?
Or decision.
And then you do that iteratively, not a straight planned path. You will not traverse the path that a planning based solution would traverse, but you basically find your own way. And over time, you discover new rules, you discover new processes, you discover new shortcuts, you discover new insights that you didn't even know existed. So I think that kind of exploration is something that agents would need, and you have to give them the space if you really want them to innovate or to work within the boundaries. Otherwise, you just replicating. And so if you take everything that people are doing right and wrong and just accelerating that by a few million times. So if you don't have any control or guardrail on top of it, I mean, it becomes more like a coin toss in the end.
Yeah, this is the good old phrase of slice the elephant.
Hmm.
Because right now your ERPs are the elephants, and if you start try to inject some tiny amount of drug into them with using agents, they don't even notice that you're doing
Hmm.
that. Right? You need to have proportional impact spaces for this, right? So then breaking down the architecture, breaking down things into smaller pieces is something that people need to think about. And the benefit of it is that you don't need to tackle the whole thing at once. You can basically start carving smaller pieces out, dealing with that, building the strategy around it, building the way of working and operations around it, and then taking the next one and the next one and the next one. So it's not a huge, let's just migrate to a new ERP system project anymore.
Hmm.
I don't want to send the message that you need another 10 years to get there. That's the wrong way of thinking, because by the time you're done with your ERP migration to a new ERP, as we see with the current setups, the whole world has changed, and you need to rethink. I don't know, we all are living on Mars or something, and then nobody
Absolutely.
wants ERP.
Absolutely. And I think it's more, I mean, last time when we said, okay, we don't want a transformation of big T, we want a transformation with a small t. And I think maybe we don't need, before transformation, we might need to terraform the landscape into something that can actually, that can sustain life of these agents and not suck the oxygen out of them. That would be one. And I think there's also a kind of a message or a lesson to, we covered the Klarna story. More I think about it, I think there's also a message to the ERP vendors, because Klarna is not the first, they won't certainly be the last. I mean, the more open you are with respect to agent, the more proactive steps you can take with respect to enabling or opening up your rules, opening up your platform for agents to, other party agents to come and make decisions. The more you become a platform, the more valuable you will be. Otherwise, if you look at, I mean, it won't take. I was looking at some of the startups who have been working on this. They've already started looking for those ERP solutions which are in line with that. So I think agentic revolution is going to be quite huge for enterprises. So either you are riding the wave or you are under it. So it's also a big message for the enterprise ERP vendors, enterprise software vendors, to also start thinking about fundamentally how could you open up your platform for your agents, but also third-party agents, and how can you actually promote innovation, not or stifle it?
Yeah, I have an extra beef with that they're so damn expensive as well.
Absolutely.
And then just adding more into it, it becomes a burden for many companies. But the pattern of breaking these things down and going and taking one operation or one part of the what the ERP does into a new solution and more modern solution has been there for a while. We know about that. Salesforce did it with the sales operations when they took out the actual CRM function out of what Oracle did or what SAP did on prem, and they built a cloud modern way of working with it. Workday is doing that to HR function. There's others who are coming in and basically slowly taking those pieces. So the breaking down of these centrally managed, centrally planned, centrally developed ERPs has been there when
Mm.
people had to pay. I think now with the fast moving world and Klarnas of the world who say like, well, actually, why should we pay thousands of dollars per person per employee for this service? Why can't we just basically do whatever we want and model our software systems again after what we want to do, not what they tell
Mm.
us to do, right? So that is another thing that people should think, like build your infrastructure around what you want to do rather than trying to follow the practices of the big vendors, because the big vendors' practices are quite outdated.
Yeah. And long term, just to stake it a bit, let's say 10 years from now, 2034, how do you see the whole enterprise landscape? Do you still see monoliths still being there, or replaced by something else, or maybe, what do you see the long-term vision, or the next 10 years? How would you paint a picture?
Yeah, so I think the monoliths will be there, but the successful and winning companies, they're not using them.
Ooh.
The successful winning companies, the most valuable companies in the world, will be the ones who are very adaptive, and through adaptability they achieve resilience. They're very customer centric, and they can actually personalize not only their services and products through agents, but also their operations to the customers. Because then I was listening to Spotify, my former employer's presentation this morning, that they said like their aim is to have 650 million products. For each of their users, they will have their own products. The way I see it, in the future, you will have the same amount of mini operation flows going on per customer as you have the service you created for them. So everything becomes personalized. And that's where the winning big companies will be, this decentralized, more adaptive, and focused on personalization that can actually run like a sports team and make decisions in milliseconds, maybe, but in a matter of very short time and high clock speed, so they can outrun every competition.
Absolutely agree with you. I think once again, to quote Darwin, it's not the strongest or the fastest that survives, it's the one that adapts most. I think the companies of the future will be adaptable, and adaptability is not just, I think we have to start defining adaptability a little bit, because a lot of people think about adaptability in a sense that, okay, something happens and how do I respond to it, or how do I recover? That is resilience. If you are fast, that's agility. But adaptability, you have to define in terms of how can you shape customer values, or how do you adapt to changing market conditions? How do you adapt to changing political conditions? How do you shape to different economic conditions? How can you trump proof your company? I think that's the kind of adaptability that's the definition of adaptability. And I think a lot of companies will actually push the word adaptability to its limits. So I just agree with you. I think it's just gonna be that will be the key word, and I think agentic enterprise and agents will be the one that will be driving, kind of reinventing the company, every day. If I'm very philosophical, just reinventing the company every day. So when Amazon says they have day one every day, I think that's gonna become a reality for a lot of companies. They will be day one every day.
Exactly, and you just reminded me of a quote from one of the Bible books of data-driven stories, and how data can actually really radically shift an industry. The famous book and movie Moneyball. Their motto was adapt or die. I think it's, maybe some people say that's harsh, but that's a reality. You might not die, but you will not win if you don't adapt in the future. So to wrap it up, maybe I can actually tell the full story of the bank that you mentioned.
Okay,
So the story is that I heard it from a former employee of one of the banks, not naming which bank it is, but they had a very old Windows NT machine, and this is in early 2010s, so that was probably 25 years old operating system running. Nobody knew what it was, what that did. They were trying to inspect the code, and it was too complicated to figure out. Nobody could find the code that was running on it. The only thing they knew, that if that machine stopped, the whole bank stopped. So it had something to do with their mainframes and all of that. I don't know what exactly it was. After a while, the actual machine started coming up with this warning sign or warning window that was empty, and it just had an OK button. And whenever that warning sign came up, the whole thing stopped and the whole bank stopped. And nobody could figure out how to solve that problem. So what they did is the most amazing workaround. They basically built a Windows NT application that clicked on that OK button. So that warning sign went away and the bank started working. So whenever that came up, there was something that was clicking on that piece of the screen. So they were basically saying like we just there's a millisecond or 1 second disruption, but it continues working. This is what a lot of operations are doing with Excel to their ERPs. Yeah. They're creating those scripts to click on warning signs to get rid of the problem rather than rethinking it and really applying proper intelligence into it.
Yep. Cool. So this was a really fun discussion. And we will come back with more and more interesting topic. If you want us to talk about something interesting in this, I think now you would have got the drift of what we're talking about. So if you have anything, any comment or reflection, any that you'd like us to discuss, or if you would like to also participate with us on this podcast, please do me or Ali or write us a comment. We'll be very happy to.
Yeah, and you can find us on www.fortbrain.com, so you can reach out to us from there as well. I'm hoping that there are some people who disagree with us and want to debate us on that. So let's see if we can find someone.
Oh, that would be lovely. I always like a good debate.
Great. Thank you so much. Thanks for watching and listening. See you next time.
Thank you. See you.